Hi, welcome to LinkedIn for Networking. I'm Nadia Whiteside. So let's begin with defining what networking is. And we're talking about building relationships for a purpose. And that purpose may vary based on what your professional needs are. So some of you are currently in job search, others are contemplating a career transition, and others are happy in your profession, but maybe just looking to expand your network and the connections that you have. So, whatever your needs are, we want to define right out of the gate what your purpose is. Why do you want to build these relationships? And then we'll go from there. So, I want you to think about that. And here's some prompts to help you define what your purpose really is. We can network for industry information to maybe see what trends are going on in our fields, in our industry, gather company information, which is really valuable if you're in job search. And maybe you're thinking about, well, I'd like to define my search to a few target companies, and you want to research them, understand their culture, maybe their benefits a little bit better, gain some further insight from other professionals working in your field, making connections through professional associations, which is valuable whether you're working now or not. There's always opportunities for continued education through associations, leadership positions, getting involved within your industry, promoting your brand, and just, ongoing networking and connecting. And again, possible target companies, that's really valuable when developing your job search strategy. So I want you to think a little bit about this as we're talking about networking and LinkedIn is what do you really want to get out of this activity of expanding your connections and reaching out to people? What do you want to talk to them about? So let's break this down a little bit. We network for information, industry, company, as I said, lots of different reasons. So that may be your target for today, is focusing how do I gain some more information? Some of us want to network for advice. Maybe we're thinking about a career change or making a change, just to a different field within the same industry. Or if you're a new graduate, how do I get my foot in the door? And what's a great entry level move for me to make to poise myself for growth within this field? So networking for advice is very common. And we're actually going to have a little bonus segment at the end about informational interviewing and how to really solicit some solid advice from other professionals in your industry. We network for referrals as well. So for job seekers, this is a great strategy for getting to those decision makers, connecting to recruiters and hiring managers. And the great thing about LinkedIn that we'll dive into is those recruiters and hiring managers actually coming to you, which is the ideal situation. And that's really what we want to help you be poised for and develop your LinkedIn profile around, is to attract recruiters. So we want to draw people to your homepage and connect with you on LinkedIn. Referrals are a great way to start and get to those decision makers. So now that we've kind of framed it and you have an idea about why do I want to network and what are the outcomes I'm seeking, let's get started on some actual, action steps here, okay? One thing we should know, just to frame this, lay this as a foundation, is there are some basics you should have in your LinkedIn profile. Your headline, which I like to call your branding statement, and that's the statement right under your name. It kind of talks about who you are. So what's your profession, whether it's your title or in more broad artistic terms, kind of what do you bring to an organization? What's your brand? A nice professional headshot that's current, that looks like you, is authentic, and is also appropriate in the way it conveys your professional image to your industry or field of work. Upload your resume. That's current, of course. In a PDF format is probably the best format in which to have your resume online, so that you can lock in all the formatting and it won't be jumbled when others view it. Include your work background with details. I always recommend that you have 3 written recommendations on LinkedIn from various individuals. And try not to group those all within one job you've had, one company. A variety of recommendations is going to serve you best. And then have individual connections endorse your skills as well. Those are the basics of what you should have to really get started actively on LinkedIn. So let me give you some examples. Here's a great profile page for an individual who's a social business program manager with IBM. You want to make sure that your profile is completely updated. And what I mean by that is your contact information, experience, your profile photo, your education. So if you've recently gone back to school and maybe gotten a new credential or certification, make sure you have that on there. If you're in job search, so you're no longer employed, you want to be sure that your dates are accurate of your employment and that you can state previously program manager or, that type of thing, so that it's up to the minute, accurate, and timely, so that when someone takes a glance at your profile, they're going to see exactly what your status is here and now. Here's another one I like. Nancy's got a lovely profile picture. So recent professional photo. She was smart enough to include a website address as well, which I love because that's a great way for recruiters to gain additional information. It really sparks their interest and draws them to you, lets them learn more about you. So I love that she's got that front and center for her website. If you run a blog, that's another thing. Put your blog on there, anything like that that's related to the business that you're engaged in. Your summary should address, these are the 4 components of your brand: who I am, what I do, how I do it, and for whom I do it. And to your left, you can see a little segment of Kelly's summary profile. And she decided to write hers in bullets, which is really easy to read. Some people like to do a narrative summary. I don't really have a preference. I think it's important to have some keywords in there that really align with your industry. That's going to help recruiters find you more easily. And then using these elements of who am I as a professional, what type of work do I do, how do I do it, that speaks to your attributes and skills. So if you take a democratic approach to leadership, or, if you have an engaging personality that embraces diverse groups of people and encourages everyone to have a voice in the workplace, like whatever your style is, that's the how you do it. So that gives the reader a little insight into your personality. And finally, the for whom I do it, that's what kind of field or industry do you work in? And you can be as specific as you want to be. So if you work in accounting, but you've always worked for advertising firms and you want to stay in the advertising field, then you want to specify that. So you can be as specific or as general as you want based on your job search and what your ideal, really coveted position is that you're seeking. So when it comes to networking and LinkedIn, and that's what we're really talking about today, there's really 2 major functions. It's to build your network through the social media application and nurture relationships, short and long term, that will lead you to job opportunities and having a larger connection to your industry, promoting your own brand and the work that you do. That's what we're talking about. So our goals today should be twofold: building your network and nurturing relationships. So that's what we're going to talk about specifically. So let's get started. Let's begin building your network. So the first step I recommend is just add everyone in your professional life as a connection. Start with that. And I always recommend inside out. So start with the people closest to you professionally, people that are your direct report, your supervisors, colleagues in your same department, those closest to you that know you the best and have observed your work the closest, and then move you out. So then you'll move into folks in other departments, people that you previously worked with, individuals maybe you went to school with in college or grad school, acquaintances, friends, even family members who might have connections that are related to your professional field. And this is as simple as going to your iPhone contacts. That's a great way to start. And then just kind of talking it through. If you're old school and you have a Rolodex or an address book, you can refer to that as well. Most of us have our contacts from the last couple of years right in our smartphones. So that's a great way to start. Start adding those people. And how you do that is you can just search for contacts. There's this little magnifying glass on the LinkedIn homepage, and you can put in email, website, or just the individual's name. Now, if your contact has a common name, then I recommend putting their job title or the city in which they work or something a little more specific, just to narrow down the search and make your search time a little shorter and more efficient. So you put in their name, press continue, they'll pop up. This is a great way to just get started. For most of us, if we've been working for 5 years or more, we've probably got 30 or 40 contacts. And remember, the way that LinkedIn works is you're connecting not only to those first degree contacts, but then you're going to be connected to everyone in their network. So even if you only start with 30 or 40 names, your connections are going to grow exponentially based on those that you're connecting with. So this is a really powerful tool to get yourself from 0 to 100 connections in a very short period of time. So once you get these close contacts, people that you have in your iPhone and elsewhere, then you can start adding them and then searching beyond that. So as they pop up here, you can see you can check mark them and decide which ones you want to add, and just add those connections. As your LinkedIn profile grows, you're also going to get invitations to connect with people. And we'll get into that more in a couple minutes, but you'll see that this is going to just keep growing and growing. I'm going to encourage you to get really active, particularly if you're in job search right now. This is one of the most important tools for you, is LinkedIn. This is going to get you further faster than a lot of other applications. So I want you to spend time every week on LinkedIn, especially if you don't want to do such a broad job search. I've worked with so many clients who apply for 200, 250 jobs, when if they were doing a more strategic approach to job search, they could cut that number in about a third and get the same percentage of responses or a higher percentage of responses. So I recommend being strategic. Accept connection requests that come to you for individuals who work in your field or have a job that you're aspiring to. Connect with people who are suggested by LinkedIn, because they're going to screen them, look at their algorithms and also their background, LinkedIn is searching for keywords. So they're going to find commonalities between your profile and the profile of others who are on LinkedIn. So they're doing some of the screening for you, and that can be a big time saver as well. And it can get you connected to people who really are going to serve you in your networking efforts. And finally, use groups. This is a fantastic tool, and I want to talk more about that in just a moment. But first, as you're reaching out to connections, it's important to personalize this request. You know, there is the stock phrase I'm sure you've seen on LinkedIn, I'd like to add you to my network. I discourage that. And the reason being, that's not offering any incentive to that professional as to why they should connect with you. This is a numbers game only to a point. As a coach, I always tell my clients, I would much rather you have 200 active, engaged connections, people who you're really sharing with, that are providing you with information, advice, that you're sharing resources with, that you have meaningful relationships with, than if you had 1,000 connections. This is more about quality than quantity. What we can do is achieve a little bit of both and find that sweet spot where you have significant connections to get you to decision makers, i.e. recruiters and hiring managers, but at the same time, a manageable number of connections. So I want you to reach out with a personalized message, and it takes just a minute to draft these. And you would say something like, I'm really excited about your profile. You have a background that mirrors mine, and I think we could share a lot of information and resources with each other. Or, I'm a new graduate and you have the type of position that I aspire to. I know that I could learn a lot from you, and I wonder if you'd be willing to connect so that we could have a conversation down the line. Or, I'm a professional in job transition and I'm very interested in the company that you work for. It's at the top of my target list, and I'd like to ask you some questions about your employment with XYZ company. Anything like that. And you see how that's much more specific, and it kind of prompts that reader, that perspective connection, to say, okay, there's a reason this person wants to connect, and there's something valuable for me in this. I'm going to have a great conversation with this person, or he and I might share some great resources, or she might have some questions that are going to get me thinking more about my profession and help me build my own brand. So we want to create a win-win situation, right? Everyone's busy, and keeping up with connections and building relationships takes time and energy. So we want to be really thoughtful about this process. Once you create that personalized invite and create that message, just click send. I think you'll find that you get a much higher percentage of return than if you just added the generic, I'd like to add you to my network message. So as I said, groups are really powerful in LinkedIn, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this because this is something I am going to strongly encourage you to get involved in to build your network. You can see on the navigation bar, there's my groups. You may already be affiliated with some groups. You can also discover and do search for groups. And this application within LinkedIn, it's free, and it allows you to access almost unlimited number of people and groups for almost every field you can imagine. And you know, if you're a Renaissance man or woman who has a lot of interests in a lot of different areas, groups is the place for you. And for those of you who are a little more specific in your focus, then I recommend finding a group that's very specific to your field or area of interest and focusing on just, one or two groups. Either way, this is a fantastic resource. So there are literally hundreds of groups to join in every field of work. So whatever your profession is, there's a group out there for you. So you want to search with keywords that reflect your position. So we'll go back to our accounting example. Accounting, advertising, those would be keywords you would put in. If you work in sports management, you would want to use a combination of words: sports, marketing management, athletics, sports organizations, things like that. And then if you want to connect with people where it's more personal interest, you can do that as well. And here's a couple of examples: creative writers, history enthusiasts. There's just really no limit to the groups that are out there. So why are these valuable? Well, they're valuable professionally because they're going to be talking and communicating as groups about opportunities, about continuing education opportunities, about job opportunities, about companies that are expanding, about trends in the marketplace, things like that that are going to be really valuable for you to know about. On the personal side, and when we get to interviewing and actually sitting down with folks talking to hiring managers about a prospective position, the personal stuff really can lend itself to the conversation as well. Finding out who the people that you'll be working with or for, what are their interests? And do you have some common ground with them? Is the company as a whole dedicated to maybe a certain cause? Do they work with schools offering after-school resources? Or does your prospective supervisor have an interest in animal rescue or whatever it is? This is a great way to find some conversation and common ground topics for interviews when you get there. So lots of reasons to get involved in groups. I highly recommend that you look at the number of audience members when you're viewing the description of a group. So if they have just 6 or 8 members, maybe it's not going to be worth your while to get really engaged in a group that's small, unless you work in a super specific field. If you work in something where there's only a handful of people who do your job nationwide, that's a different story. But generally speaking, I recommend looking at groups that have at least 100 members, because that means there's going to be some robust conversations. There's going to be some job opportunities. There's going to be industry information, discussion about trends, things that are going to really serve you in your job search and as you're building your network and building your brand as a professional. So numbers do matter a little bit with groups. And see how active they are. When's the last time someone posted? That's the other recommendation I would make. So are these groups communicating on only an annual basis, or are they connecting every few days or something in between? So number of members of the group and how much activity they have are great criteria for finding the group that's right for you. So the most important thing, now that we've made some connections on LinkedIn, is building and maintaining those relationships. And that's, in essence, what LinkedIn is all about. And that's what's different about LinkedIn from other job sites and things like this, is that it's about building connections and maintaining relationships over a long period of time that will serve you in the future as well as in the present. So our goal as job seekers, for those of us who are unemployed or underemployed or unsatisfied in our current jobs, you want some short-term benefits, right? You want to connect to recruiters. You want to find out about opportunities. You want people to refer you to other individuals that can help you find a position that's right for you. But in the long term, it's valuable to have connections as well, because even if you're satisfied with where you are now, we know the average tenure for young professionals is about 3 years. For those of us who are mid-career in that 45 to 50, it's just a few years longer than that. So we often find ourselves looking for work, needing to transition, be adaptable, be flexible within our industry in a much shorter period of time than sometimes we would like. So here's some tips for maintaining these relationships that are really going to serve you throughout your career. Provide status updates. Keep yourself visible in terms of your brand. So one of the things I recommend is pick a day once a week. I do LinkedIn on Thursdays myself. Pick a day of the week to really read through. What are your connections posting? What can you share on LinkedIn? Are there interesting articles or original content that you've written, maybe on a blog or something, that you'd like to share with others? Keep your information current. Keep the conversation going. Share your posts with these connections and groups that you belong to through LinkedIn. This is what it's all about, is relationships, is having a network of professionals who are supporting each other. And so even if you, as someone who's in job search right now, feels as though this is kind of a one-way street, you know, I don't have anything to offer, I'm unemployed, you do have something to offer. You may have years of experience and education that you have to share with others. You're reading about your industry, you're learning about new trends. So you do have something to share, even if it's not related to a specific company that you're connected to right now. So always think of this as relationship building, win-win. What can I share with my connections that's going to be valuable to them, and they in turn will be responding and sharing things with me? Okay, so it's just like building relationships in person. We want there to be give and take. We want there to be an exchange. Social media is no different. Getting the most from your LinkedIn page. So I want to really summarize this conversation by giving you a few other tips to keep in mind, particularly for those of you who are currently in job search. Adding your email and mobile phone is really important. If a recruiter is drawn to your page, and they will be, the more specific your profile is, the more you integrate those keywords that align you with jobs that are out there. And this is all what you're learning from your network, by the way, by having all of these connections. Wouldn't it be nice if they look at your page and right there is your phone number, right there is your email? So make it available. Make yourself very accessible to hiring professionals. Regularly update and add to your profile. And even if you don't have a new class that you've taken this month or anything like that, maybe you've done some volunteer work. Maybe you wrote a brief article or can share a brief post. Change your profile picture, change your background image from summer to fall. Anything that prompts your audience, your connections, that you've updated something on your LinkedIn page. That will drive them to the page to look at what your updates are. That'll get them to read it. That'll get you in their mind. So when they're working in their industry and they find out about a job opening, if they've recently seen a post of yours or they've been to your page, you're going to be forefront in their mind for a referral. Keep expanding your connections. And again, sharing information, just posting. It doesn't have to be original. One of the things I like to share is great podcasts I've listened to. So that's one thing that I reach out to my network about quite often is just a great podcast I listened to, or a fantastic book that I really enjoyed, and why I think it's so timely, or why I think it's relevant to the work that we do, whatever it is. So get creative, give yourself a few minutes each week to make those updates and keep growing your profile. So as a bonus, for those of you who would like to stay on for an additional 5 minutes, I want to share with you kind of the next phase of job search and networking, which is the informational interview. And once you've built a strong network on LinkedIn, you want to start making those connections work for you in a much more real way. So if you'd like to stay on for this, I've got just a few slides that I think will be really valuable. Well, let's first define what is an informational interview. It's actually a conversation. A lot of career coaches and HR professionals refer to it as an informational interview. That is the most common term, so that's why I use it. But it's not about asking for a job, but this is really you reaching out to those connections that you've made through LinkedIn and asking them for insight into their field, information about the company they work for, their opinion about conducting your job search and how to be more effective. It's asking them what they know, what they think, and who they know. So the goal is to have these individuals help you in your job search steps, with the ultimate goal of getting inside the company. So let me give you an example of what I mean by that. As a career coach, we highly recommend informational interviews to our clients. It's kind of a mandatory step. We really want you to get out there and have conversations with people who are working in the companies and in the jobs that you would like to have. So we know that of all job seekers, 80% of those who land a job, their ideal job, will do so through their network. Let me say that one more time. 80% of job seekers will find their next position through their network. So that means only 20% of you who are sending out resume after resume, going on job platforms and, looking at postings, only 20% of you are successfully going to land a job that way. 80% of you are going to find it through your network. And informational interviewing is the key to getting inside those companies and getting that referral. So here's some basic guidelines for conducting an informational interview. And by the way, we're starting from that conversation of when you reach out to a connection, you give them that personalized message of why you'd like to connect. And now you've had a few exchanges via email, posts, etc. Now you're going to ask them for an informational interview. This interview is going to be less formal and lengthy than a real interview, but you still want to approach it in a professional manner. You can do this over the phone, via Zoom, over coffee in a public or business setting. Prior to COVID, a lot of people were doing informational interviews at Starbucks and places like that. And you want to be very specific when you're asking about an informational interview, when you're soliciting a person. Would you have 30 minutes to talk to me a little bit about your job? Or would you be available for a 30-minute conversation to talk to me about your career path and how you made it to this position? Something like that. Once you've solicited that individual and they've agreed on a date and time for the conversation, here's your guidelines. You're not asking for a job. It's very important to start the conversation with, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me. I just want to reiterate that I'm not asking for a job. I'm exploring opportunities and gathering information at this point. And I just think you would be a wonderful resource for this process. So I have some prepared questions I'd like to pose. Set the stage right away. Let them know what you want and what you don't want. I just want to ask you some questions. I'm hoping you can share with me a little bit about your career path or about the company, the nature of your job, whatever it is you want to know. Be professional. Use your value statement. Tell them who you are, what you do, how you do it, right? Focus the conversation on the ask, on those questions that you want to get answered from that individual. So what is it that's so valuable about this connection? Why did you want to connect with them in the first place? Oh, because they work for the company that I'm trying to get in with, or they have exactly the job that I would like to have someday. Whatever the reason is, your ask, your questions are going to revolve around that. So it's very personalized. You want to show that you're listening actively. It is okay to take notes during an informational interview. And finally, based on what that individual shares with you, think about something you can do for them to keep that conversation and relationship going. Make sure to stay within the time frame that you agreed on. So if you agreed on 30 minutes, be absolutely respectful of their time. Don't go a minute over. Thank them again for their time and follow up with a thank you message to the person that you talked with. If you were referred by someone else, let them know that you had that conversation as well. You know, drop a note to Jane and say, thank you so much for introducing me to Chris. We had a really interesting conversation yesterday, and you were right. He has so much insight into our professional field. Thank you for introducing us. Something like that. Make sure you follow up and stay in touch. Informational interviewing is by far one of the most valuable activities for job search and transition. So I know it's a little scary to have a conversation with someone and ask them questions, but if you're prepared and if you really know what you're looking for in terms of information and what you want to glean from that person, then it's really going to serve you well. Finally, what you want to get to with that individual once they've shared information, you've thanked them and done the follow-up, ask them what next steps you should be taking and who else you should talk to. That's an invitation for them to give you a referral within the company, within the field that they work in. So once you've established this relationship through your conversation, that's the question you want to ask. Who should I be talking to? What else should I be doing for next steps? Oftentimes they will just offer it up to you right there. So that's how we get to these decision makers. Okay? You can type your questions into the chat box. You can also email me at nadiacoachescareers@gmail.com. And if you're interested in additional content I have, other topics, and individual coaching, I encourage you and invite you to visit my website at yournextchapter.com. Thank you so much for your time and best of luck in your career search.